So, good afternoon, my dear students. Today we will continue with the discussion on the so-called poem called On Children by Khalil Gibran. So, before I could start discussing the poem, hoping that you all have read it once, twice or thrice, and you have taken into consideration the things, what are the things that you have understood with that, and finally we will have to discuss it with the line by line about what actually the poet is letting us know through this work on children, through this poem On Children by Khalil Gibran. The one thing that I would like to tell you before starting my discussion is that I have very clearly told you that this On Children is actually an extract from his major work called The Prophet. And you have already read the importance of The Prophet. That work is something which is one of his major works of Khalil Gibran, right? And it has been translated into several languages, including Kannada also. So, why I am telling you this is because the poem that we are reading today is actually a extract from his work here. Then, on the other hand, we discuss certain things related to who is Khalil Gibran, what exactly does he do, and what all the things that he has written and all those stuff. And at the same time, we also have understood that most of all his works, especially the poems, are something which never follow or they don't adhere to the rules and regulations of the versification. One clear-cut example is the same poem that is prescribed for you, because you have already read it once. And did you ever felt that it was just like a poem or something? Did you ever feel that like, yeah, you are reading the lines of the poem? No, right? It was something kind of a descriptive, more of descriptive thing there, isn't it? So, about Khalil Gibran, I told you that he is a Lebanese and an American artist and a poet, right? And then what all his works, and then we also discussed, coming back to the title of the poem On Children, and the poem is, yes, it has been written on the children in general, isn't it? Then we also discussed about the pre-reading activity, isn't it? The pre-reading activity asked us 3 questions, isn't it? One is keeping expectations from 2 ends, that is, on the one hand you have the children, you have expectation in the middle, and then on the other hand you have the parents. So what exactly do they expect? Parents from children, children from parents. And the last question, that is the question number 3 on pre-reading activity, was on, like, did you ever feel that something, whenever you have become a child to your parents or vice versa, did you ever feel that maybe I have become very possessive or demanding? Why? So these were some of the questions that were asked, and you will have to have your own answers in terms of answering that question, because it is something that is related to the title of the poem On Children here. All right. So having said that, let us today read the poem that we have to have a discussion on. Okay, so before I could read it, I would like you to, all of you, to take a look at the picture that is given there. Okay, so you can see that the cranes or the swans or whatever, like, there are some birds which are sitting on a branch of a tree, and what exactly are they doing? It's just a kind of a reflection on what exactly the poem is all about. Yesterday we had a very first reading about the poem, and I think nowhere you have felt that probably it's a poem, because it's more of a descriptive. And going back to the poet, he himself has very clearly told us about, like, he is a man, one who has written most of his works in the form of explanations or descriptive things, isn't it? So he is a man, one who never considered the poetic versification, and we also know that this is a poem where expectations from both children and parents. This poem, the gist of the poem is all about expectation from children to parents and from parents to children. In that way you will have to understand. Then let us straight away start the discussion here. He starts the poem with a conjunction which I told you yesterday, and a woman who held a babe. Babe, this is a very quite familiar word, all of you know that, right? So babe is nothing but a baby. Okay, so there is a woman who's holding her baby, okay, against her bosom. She's holding the baby and she starts speaking and speak to us of children. In the very first line, you come to know that there is a woman who is having her child in her bosom and she is talking to someone. And she actually asks the other person to speak to us of children. Getting? So a woman is asking, okay, a person to tell her about children. Okay, this is what you need to understand. The tone of the poem here is something about a woman carrying a baby in her bosom, asking someone to speak to us about the children. And he said, the very word he will tell you that it can be either the speaker in the poem, or you, in other ways you can also consider this reference he to where is this whole poem is taken from? As I said in the earlier class, it has been extracted from his major work called The Prophet. So what you need to understand here is that the reference to the pronoun he here can be the speaker in the poem itself, or it can be a direct reference to the prophet. Okay, since the work is taken from the prophet, reference to the pronoun he in the poem can be the speaker or he can be the prophet. That thing you will have to understand here. Okay, so when she asks him to speak about the children, and he said, this is the only question that the woman asks the prophet or to the speaker to tell us more about or to speak to us more about the children. And from here onwards, the whole words, whatever the poem has been written, are the words of the prophet or the speaker. I guess you are following it, right? So there is a woman who has asked the prophet or to the speaker in the poem to speak to us about the children. And from there, and he said, he starts speaking about the children as he was requested by the old woman. Okay, so this woman who asks the prophet to speak to them about the children, he starts telling about the children. So the very first line that is spoken by the prophet or by the speaker is, your children are not your children. That is, when he starts speaking about it, or when he starts speaking about the children, the very first thing that he does or that he tells us is that your children are not your children. Getting? So this is the very first line, or this is the very first word that the prophet speaks about the children, saying that they don't belong to you. Children don't belong to their parents. This is the first line that he speaks about. So let us go further and find out what all the things that he has to tell to the woman, also to us, to the readers. Right? Okay. Then, they are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They reference to the children. Okay. So they are the sons and daughters. Children are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. That is, they came to the earth because they have their own dreams and aspirations. Okay, so daughters, they are the sons and daughters. That is, children are the sons and daughters of their respective parents, and they are living, or they are leading a life leading, that is, they are longing for itself. That is, they are here for themselves. Children are there in the life, came through their parents, and they are longing in the life, they are leading their own life for themselves. They come through you but not from you. Who? They is a reference to the children throughout the poem. Okay, so they come through you but not from you. So when you just take into consideration about the whole scenario of the humanity that is prevailing in the world, we do accept the fact that yes, we have been gifted from God, isn't it? So whenever we just think of a person, one who was born, one who has just come onto the earth, we definitely say that yeah, you have come from the God or something in that way, isn't it? So in an outer world scenario, we will definitely think and believe and assume that we are the gifts from God. So he says that the children come to the earth through their parents but not exactly from you. That is, they come through. So there is a kind of a association between the child and a parent in the form of a link coming to the earth, that is becoming or starts leading the life. So he means to say that children come through you, through their parents, but not from you, not from you. He says, and they come through you but not from you. So a parent or a mother is someone who is always giving birth to the children in the form of giving birth, and that will happen only by someone else. Let us see what does he say in the further lines. They come through you but not from you. Don't assume the fact that you have given them a birth or something. It is nothing but the God's creation, isn't it? So it is only because of the blessings of the God that you are there on the earth. It's not only you, even me for that matter, isn't it? So any living creature on this earth is obviously a gift from God, isn't it? So that's what you will have to understand here. Then, and though they are with you, yes, once they come to the life or once they come on to the earth in the form of a son or a daughter coming through your mother, coming through our respective mothers, okay, our respective mothers, they are with us, isn't it? You become a father, there is a mother who needs to take care of that, yet they belong not to you. So here what the poet is trying to tell us is that yes, life, giving birth is obviously by a mother, but the life giver is someone else. Getting? So, and though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. Only for all these worldly things we say that he is my son, she is my daughter, because I am the parent. In the similar way, when we talk about the life on earth, it is obviously a gift from God. Okay, so I'll tell you in the later part of the poem when we discuss that. Right now you have to understand that children come to the earth through their parents, of course, yes, but they do not exactly belong to you in the infinite situations. Okay, and though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. They are there with you, yes, and you should be taking care of your children, right? But they do not belong to you, is what he says. You may give them your love but not thoughts. This is a very, very important line in the poem. Okay, most of the time I have seen a question on 1 mark from this line only. That is, you may give your love to your children. Okay, so the poet is of the opinion that being parent, you can love your children. That is, you may give them your love but not your thoughts. That is, a parent can love the child, but he cannot give his or her own thoughts to the child. Means to say that a child should have freedom. It is not the fact that you should only be reactive or proactive only onto the words by your parents. Okay, the thoughts that may come to you, to your mind, once you start leading a life there, isn't it? So that's why the poet is of the opinion that being parents, you can just give them the love that they need. Okay, what you can provide them? You can provide them love, you can provide them the basic needs of the life, isn't it? But You cannot make them exactly like you in the form of giving your own thoughts to the children. That is what he tells us here. Okay, so please underline that line. It's a very, very important line in the poem. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. Okay, so look at the way how he connects line to line in the form of a description here. That is, a parent can give a love to his or her child, but not the thoughts, because they are individuals. They have their own way of life. They have their own ambitions. They have their own dreams in their life. Isn't it? So that's why the poet says that, for they may have their own thoughts. That is, what he means to say here is that give enough freedom for the child, not making them to think the way that your parents think. Give him freedom to think in his own way and lead the life. Whether it is a son or a daughter, give them their freedom to choose their life in their thoughts, whatever they want to become or something. Okay, so for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies. What do you mean by housing their bodies? Housing their bodies is nothing but it's a direct reference to how a parent can provide all the comforts to his or her son or a daughter. That is, you can provide them food, shelter, accommodation, whatsoever. What are the things that they need in order to, lead a normal life? You can just provide them whatever they want in their upbringing, so to say, in their upbringing. That is, you may house their bodies, but not their souls. Okay, so we do definitely believe the fact that you can provide all the necessities that they want in the life, but once you cannot house their souls. That is, he is asking the parents to give the freedom they need. Okay, but let me tell you one more thing here. Okay, if the freedom is given to you by your parents, do not use it in the wrong way. Whatever the freedom is given to you, you will have to use it in proportion to what your thinkings or what your aspirations or what are your dreams in your life. That is what you need to understand, isn't it? So you may house, that is, parents may house their bodies. They can provide them whatever they want, but they cannot provide their, house, or they cannot provide their souls. Soul is a kind of a reference to the freedom here. That is, soul is a kind of a reference to their own freedom, because for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow. This is also a very important line, because the souls of their children dwell, that is, they always live in a generation. Especially you take an example of the right now, the generation in the 21st century, that most of the children definitely are concerned about their future. I want to become this, I want to become that. You have your own aspirations, you have your own dreams, isn't it? So when it comes into the fact of the practical life that is going on in the earth, so that is, you can just dwell by providing them the necessities that they want in their life, but you cannot provide the necessity that they need in terms of their future. Why? Because the young generation these days, the younger generation these days, the children these days dwell in the house of tomorrow. They want to become this, they want to become that. They just want to think in the terms of the future aspects or the future prospects, so to say, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. I think this is a very good personification that has been used by the poet in order to tell about how do they think about their parents, isn't it? Nowadays you take an example like, you have internet today, you have net banking, you have everything, on your fingertips. There is Google, who is a god, isn't it? He gives you everything whatever you ask him for, isn't it? In a similar way, the technology today has gone beyond the imagination of human beings. Don't you think so? So do you really think that same thing was there probably 30 to 40 years back? So what he means to tell us here is that the parents should give the freedom in such a way that they should live in the house of tomorrow. That is, they will have to think about their future, and when they are so smart in such a way, you cannot even visit, not even in your dreams. That is a direct reference to the parents has been told in the form of giving the freedom to the children, because these children are who live in the house of tomorrow. They have a vision, they have a future, they have a future plan. So that particular future you can't even think of, or you can't even imagine. That is what he's trying to tell us here. So give enough freedom to your child in terms of choosing his or her own career. All right. Not even in your dreams. That is, a parent cannot even visit even in the dreams about what are the future prospects your child might be having. Okay, in that way he's telling us. And then you may strive to be like them. That is, he's now denoting it everything to the parents. That is, parents can strive. That is, striving, what do you mean by strive? Striving is working hard, isn't it? So parents can strive to be like their children. Parents can strive, or they can work hard to be like the children, but seek not to make them like you. That is, don't bombard them or don't force them, don't pressurize them that no, you have to become like me. Why? Because in the earlier line only, the poet has very clearly told us that the generation thinks in tomorrow's way. That is, they have a future ambition or an aim or a prospect in such a way that being a parent you cannot imagine. Okay, so he says that you can try to become like them by working hard, but seek not them to make like you. Just don't make them that you have to become only this, only that, or something. Okay, this line is a very good example for today's generation, where especially in the field of education, isn't it? Don't force them, let them become whatever they are interested in, isn't it? You may force a child to become that or this or something, but see to it that they also have their own interest in doing so. Okay, so he says you can strive, you can work hard to be like them, but don't make exactly like what you are. That's what he tries to say here. Then, for life goes not backward nor tarries with yesterday. Why? You should not force them to be like you, because once the time is gone, it is gone, isn't it? For life goes not backward, it doesn't go backward, isn't it? It doesn't go backward, nor tarries, T-A-R-R-I-E-S. Tarries means staying there only, okay? Staying at one place. Ideal, heard of that word, right? So time doesn't stay with yesterday, time will keep on moving and moving. Time will not wait for anyone. This is the universal truth, you all know about that, right? So he says that you can work hard to be like them, but don't force them to be that they should become like you. Why? Because once a decision is made, then you cannot change it. Why? He makes a direct reference to time. Once the time goes, it will go. You cannot buy back the time, isn't it? So that's an universal fact. So he says that for life goes not backward, nor it is idle. It keeps on going and going. Do you really think that time will wait for anybody? No, right? We don't. Nobody. None of us will the time wait for. It is something that we need to carry on with the time as it when it comes to us. Getting? Hope all of you are following it up with what exactly the poet wants to tell with the discussion that we are having right now here with that. Then further he starts talking to the parents, and further the poet tells them, the poet or the speaker, or who is telling this? The prophet. Okay, just keep that thing in your mind. Okay, a prophet is now speaking to the woman in terms of, he is also speaking to the readers of the poem, saying that you are the bows. Who? Bows are directly referred to the parents. You know what is a bow, right? So you are the bows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth. Look at the personification that is being used by the poet here. He says that being a parent, it is the fact that you are becoming bow. Why? A parent is a person one who gives birth to a child. A parent is a person one who gives or provides everything necessary in the life. On the other hand, it is up to the level of the thinking or about doing the things in the future is up to the child only. So that is why the poet is comparing that parents are as strong as the bow. Okay, he is making a comparison. You are the bows from which your children as living arrows. Now, whom do you think that the reference to the living arrows is meant? So when there is a bow, obviously there should be an arrow, isn't it? Without bow, arrow cannot work. Without arrow, bow is useless, isn't it? So it is something that is blend together in order to have the futuristic perspective in one's mind. So the prophet is making a reference that bows are compared to the parents and the arrows are actually compared to the children. Okay, so what is the work of a bow? So you fix it with a bow and then you pull it as much as you can, as much as you pull it with your strength, that much you can see the bright future, or you can reach up to a very longer distance. That is how actually. So the life is compared in such a way that the bows are compared to the parents and the arrows are actually compared to the children. That's what you got to understand here. Okay, so obviously when you're leaving an arrow from a bow, it obviously goes further, isn't it? So the more strengther, the more longer it may reach, isn't it? So it all depends on how the parents should take care of their children. Then he makes a reference to the third person here in the poem, and he comes to the archer. Who's an archer? A person one who plays with the bows and arrows, isn't it? Archer. The archer seeks the mark upon the path of the infinite. What is infinite? A melting point, isn't it? Where you think that something that is an eternal, infinite. And he bends you with his might that his arrows may go swift and far. Okay, it is also a very important line here. The archer, whom do you think the archer is now? The archer is nothing but, who's an archer? Archer is in reference to the God. He says archer in the very first beginning line, and then rest of the things he keeps on going and telling that the reference to the archer is a direct reference to the God himself. Okay, in the rest of his lines he keeps on denoting the God with a pronoun he, and that he is written in the capital. So wherever you are finding he, that is an exact reference to the God himself. Right? So the archer seeks the mark upon the path of the infinite. That is, the God is knowing about the mark, isn't it? So he knows about the mark upon the path of the infinite, something which is an eternal, and he bends you. That is, God bends you with his might that his arrows may go swift and also very far. That is, God has given the life. Parent is a bow. The God has given them a life, and he sees everything about the futuristic perspectives because he is a God. He is unanimous, isn't it? He is present everywhere. So what we think here is that when there is an arrow that has been left from a bow, the God has made it a point that it should go very fast, swift. At the same time, it should go to an extent where their dreams or aspirations in their life should be fulfilled. The archer seeks the mark upon the path of the infinite, that is the God, the creator. The creator sees the path of the infinite and he bends. He is a person one who can bend or do whatever he wants because he is the mightiest, isn't it? So he is the mighty power. Bends you with his might that his arrows may go swift and far. So I have told you about the reference that has been made in terms of bows and arrows. Okay, have you heard of a saying in English that is called that? God is a player of chess and we are all just the coins. Isn't it? So there is a proverb which says that the God is the player of the chess and we are just the coins. And he keeps on moving us wherever he likes. isn't it? In the similar way, the bow and arrow example taken by the poet Khalil Gibran in order to tell us about how children should be treated in the life, isn't it? So he says that he sees to the point that I have given you the life, and I know that you got to touch, or you got to be very fast, and you got to reach up to a very larger distance in your life, is what the God wants when he gives life to the children. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness. So he says that this bending, that is whatever the might that I use in order to leave the arrows from the bow, it is only for the gladness, isn't it? Let your bending in the archer's hand, God's hand. He is the controller of everything, isn't it? Bending in the archer's hand be for gladness. For even as he loves the arrows that flies, so he loves also the bow that is stable. Amazing. Look at the last line of the poem. How does he conclude it? See, in the earlier part of the poem, when he started speaking to the woman about the children, the first reference that he made was towards the children. Then as we progressed, he started shifting his narration from children to the parents, and now after the narrating it to the parents or something, then he took us about the mightiest power, that is God. And at the last line of the poem, he says, beautifully concludes by saying that let your bending be there. Okay, you should understand the difficulties, isn't it? Let your bending in the archer's hand be there, but always make it use for the gladness, for the happiness, for the bright future, for the, what can I say, for maybe amazing, for your aspirations, for your dreams, for the fulfillment of everything that you want in your life. And the very last line, for even as he loves. Look at the word he, and always note that whenever he is written in caps, it is a reference to the mightiest power. That is, it is a direct reference to the God, isn't it? So for even as he loves the arrows that flies. Do you think God loves children? Of course, yes. Don't you think that God loves the parents? So that's what the ultimate gist of this last line of the poem, that is, for even as he loves the arrows that flies. Obviously, arrow, if it is there in just in a without being used, it's just a stable, it's just a non-living thing. But when it comes to a bow, only from bow it can reach up to a distance there. So that's why he concludes it very beautifully by saying that for even as he loves the arrows that flies. God is not a person, or God is not just a thing that only loves the arrows, because arrows are always meant for flying or going to a larger distance in their life. So he loves also the bow that is stable. What do you understand in the last line? That is, both bows as well as arrows are required in order to lead the life. Getting? So the beautiful conclusion of the last line is of the poem, it is that though the title of the poem is on children, but the poem is written on children, but you cannot even forget parents, nor you can forget the Creator. Getting? So he concludes by saying that God is a person, one who is a creator. God is a person, one who gives us life, isn't it? So God is God is someone who actually don't only love the arrows comparison to the children, he also loves the bow which is stable. But bow is something which is very, very important. So there is a kind of a, what can I say, mutual understanding, or there should be a mutual understanding between the children and their parents. And he concludes it that God is a creator, but it is not the fact that he loves only children. At the same time, he also loves the parents who have given the birth to the children through him. So that's why a reference to bows and arrows is made here. I hope with this discussion you have understood clearly about what Khalil Gibran wants to tell us about the children, about the parents, and about the God. So we'll stop here, and I shall conclude this next I shall conclude it by discussing the question and answers in the next class. I hope you have understood everything. So after this watching this video or something, I would request you to once again go through the poem, read it to yourself, and then just try to clarify certain things that you had a blank, or maybe you did not understand, or maybe you can have your own way of interpreting this text in terms of what we have discussed so far. Thank you. Meet you in the next class.